many of us have become so disconnected from our bodies, and there's so much there to learn and to heal from, and to let guide our lives in a direction where they can be really expansive and powerful.
It's the Health in the Real World podcast. It's time to start the show with Janke as your host. Here to give you everything that you need when it comes to fitness strategies. We keep it simple and easy. It's your roadmap to get healthy. You don't need equipment and you don't need a gym. Just the right strategies to get you fit and trim.
Welcome to Health in the Real World. We're here today with Elisabeth Kristof. Elisabeth, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely, no problem. I'm glad you're here. And you know, you work with people in a way. I'm familiar with the method that you use that you just were talking to me about. It's been a good 10 to 15 years since I've talked to anybody who's in this. Can you give a brief introduction as far as what you do and how you help people with that?
Yeah, so I practice applied neurology, which is training the different input systems like your eyes or the balance system in your inner ear, or maybe even important cranial nerves like your vagus nerve, which is a cranial nerve that relays a lot of the information from your organs and your internal system up to your brain. So I stimulate various nerves. I train your eyes, I train the balance system in your inner ear, and I train your body mapping skills so that your brain is getting better information, better input on a second by second basis. And when the brain gets better, clearer, more accurate information coming in, then it feels safer. It feels better doing its primary job, which is making predictions to keep us alive. So our brain is always making the decision safe or unsafe. When the brain feels unsafe, it'll start to generate protective outputs like pain, dizziness, muscle weakness, limited range of motion, even depression, migraine. All of those can be outputs of a nervous system and a brain that feels like it's under threat. And if I can make the information coming into the brain clear, more accurate, and more reliable, then the brain can then move you out of that protective mode into performance mode, where you have better ability to connect with people, you have greater range of motion, more strength in your muscles, less pain. And so it's really a training system that puts the brain and the nervous system at the center of the training, whether that's for movement or behavior change or even mindset coaching.
Oh, that's great. So, somebody like me, I do fitness training, and I know I would say in our culture, we have this perception of what that looks like, right? I'm going to go, very basic example. You're underweight, you have no muscle, you want to get muscle. You go into the gym 3 days a week, you lift weights, slowly you get stronger. 6 months later, a year later, you look like a different person. So that's very simplified, obviously. What in your experience, choose like one example of maybe one client, what does the process look like from, okay, they come in with this happening and then you guys do this and then this is the output?
So I think what many of us aren't taught is that we all have this really well organized, kind of miraculous system inside of us, our nervous system that drives all of our behavior and all of our outputs. And that system is always changing in response to the stimulus that we give it. And so we can choose whether that's changing in a positive or a negative direction. We have some agency over that. And so when my clients come to me, the process really looks like beginning to understand where their unique deficits are in their nervous system and how can we train to resolve those deficits so that their nervous system functions better, and they have a really practical, easy to implement protocol that they do every day, maybe in the morning, maybe before they work out, or maybe in times of stress, to re-regulate their nervous system so that they're continuously making their nervous system healthier. And over time that helps them prevent injury or reduce pain or change their behavior. So if you think of your nervous system as like a bucket, all of your life stress go into the bucket, whether that's financial stress or relationship stress or an injury, the stress of a pandemic. Everything goes into that. And exercise is also stress. And then at the same time, we have these real physiological stressors. So, say, for instance, I had an old injury in my left ankle that I never rehabbed properly. So my brain's map of where my foot is in space is not very clear. So every step I take is a little bit threatening to my brain. Or say I have a deficit in the left vestibular system, which is in the inner ear. That's my balance system, and it orients my body with the horizon. So, say I have a deficit in that vestibular system, every single second, that information coming in is a little bit threatening to my brain. And so, all of that stress goes into the bucket. And our brain and our nervous system are resilient, our bodies are resilient, but they also understand that too much stress for too long is dangerous. It leads to disease, it leads to mental health issues, it leads to autoimmune. And so your brain will start to create outputs to try to get you to change your behavior, to reduce the amount of stimulus coming in, to make your world smaller, and to keep you safe, because safety is always going to override performance. And so once the stress level in that bucket gets too high, those protective outputs start happening. So while I maybe can't do anything immediately about financial stress or life stress, although I do a lot of like somatic processing, emotional processing on the site as well. But if we can address those physiological deficits, then every single second, the nervous system is under a little bit less threat and the water level in that bucket goes down. So then you can handle more stress from the outside world coming into that bucket before moving into those unwanted outputs. So you can become stronger, you can run faster, you can move with more fluidity. And also, you don't have outputs like migraine or depression or shutdown, which are your brain's best way of getting you to reduce the amount of stimulus coming in so that you stay safe.
That makes sense. And I like how you phrase that. You said make your world smaller. It makes your world smaller. So the image that I thought was, somebody just sitting on a lazy boy and just watching TV all day. It's like I'm I may not be living my best life, but I'm safe, right?
That's
I'm
right.
not going to get attacked and I'm not making my nervous system get all haywire right now. Elizabeth, I wanted to ask you this. Sometimes as trainers or coaches, there's this perception that we sort of have everything figured out. I want to get a little bit more personal and I want to ask you about your own story. So, what has been your biggest health challenge, and whether you're still going through it or maybe in the past, and how have you overcome it, or how are you working on overcoming that?
So my biggest health challenge is it's kind of twofold. But it's all rooted actually in trauma and nervous system dysregulation. So I have a pretty high ACE score, which stands for adverse childhood experience. And so without knowing or understanding that, I lived a lot of my life in a state of hypervigilance, in a state of sympathetic nervous system, too much activation in my sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight and flight response, which can cause a lot of problems over time if you stay in that state. Because when you're in a sympathetic response, your blood is leaving your organs because your brain is getting ready for you to either fight or flee. Your heart rate is very rapid. And there's all this adrenaline and cortisol pumping out all of the time. And it's also very exhausting to have all those racing thoughts and to be so hyper aware of your surroundings. Um, and as a result, over time in my life, I developed autoimmune, I have celiac, and I deal with various autoimmune responses. And so a lot of my life has been trying to understand that, learn ways to regulate my nervous system and to heal my trauma, which is really what led me to this business. For a long time, I had a movement education company here in Austin, a Pilates studio, and we had a teacher training program. And I really focused on using applied neurology for pain management and for athletic performance. And then it wasn't until my life went through a series of events that put me under a tremendous amount of stress. I lost the business. My fiance at the time had a very rare cancer. And so I went into being a full time caretaker for him. And it was just, we were always under threat all the time, very little sleep. And I started to experience really severe outputs of my own nervous system, chronic pain. My binge eating got really severe. My autoimmune responses got more severe. Sometimes I would be so shut down that it was almost like a blackout, and my body would just shut off and really dissociate. And I began to recognize in myself the signals that I saw in my pain clients before they went into their protective response, which was pain. And I began to understand that all of this was an output of my nervous system trying to keep me safe. And I began to understand how dysregulated I had been for a really long time. And in trying to help my partner, who also had PTSD and things that came along with the cancer, I started reading all of these books like The Body Keeps the Score and Waking the Tiger, and understanding the importance of healing ourselves and healing our past, not just in our mind, but in our body as well. And I began to really practice somatic healing because as I was going through all of that stress, my own childhood trauma that had never been resolved started to come back to me. And I understood then that that stuff had to be healed at a physical level, not just a cognitive level. And so brain-based wellness is the compilation of many years of researching that and studying somatics and applied neurology and movement, and trying to put together a system that will help people develop tools for self-regulation, tools for emotional and stress processing through the body, and to really come at healing from a very integrated approach.
I like how you said that you're, developing tools that the client can use, because I think that's what Z Health is about, right? It's like you do the assessment, you figure out what direction they need to go, and then they do it on their own, right? They do it at home.
Yes.
Do you ever get people who sort of like in the fitness world, it's like fall off the wagon, right? What do you tell people who just they're like, I don't want to do this anymore, or that you kind of hit that wall? It's like, I've been doing this for 9 months and I see a little progress, or I see a lot of progress even, and they stop for whatever reason. What's your pep talk to those people?
Well, I deeply believe that we all do the best that we can at the level of our nervous system. And so many of my clients come to me because they're really frustrated. They're typically like pretty type A. They're hard driving people that want to be very successful, but they reach a certain point at which it feels like their body is starting to hold them back. So they start to get shut down by injury or migraine or just extreme fatigue or burnout, just a lot of burnout. And it's really important when somebody's in that place to not overload them with too much stress, right? Because already they're facing a brain that is trying to protect them from more stress. And so I tell people to start with a minimum effective dose. And I know that you're a big proponent of this as well, that there's that sweet spot, right? Before
Yep.
we need enough stress to cause adaptation, but not so much stress that we move into diminishing returns or even worse, negative returns, right?
Right.
And that those negative returns don't have to just be pain or injury. It could also be lack of motivation, like an internal desire not to do something because it's causing too much stress for you. And so if we can start with a minimum effective dose of even just 3 minutes a day of learning some tools to work on their respiration, a couple really high payoff neuro drills that help their brain and their nervous system function better. And they can just start with that simple, small practice that then allows them to have some success and to continuously feel better, then it's easier to build on that and add more and more and do it in a really sustainable way versus, trying to completely change your life all at once. Change is very threatening to the brain. And so it can easily push someone into threat if all of a sudden you try to change so much.
Right. That makes sense. And so speaking of that, what is your favorite sort of exercise to train the brain, like over the years, or is there something you could demonstrate for everybody
Yeah,
watching right
I'd
now?
love to give people some practical tools. So, one of the first places I like to start with is the breath, which seems crazy simple and like I can't believe this is going to make a difference, but it's a really practical and actually very important place to start because our brain is how we breathe is very, very important to our brain. So if we can improve that, it makes a huge difference in the way the nervous system functions overall. And it's highly effective and it's very simple. And we take about 20,000 breaths per day. So if each one of those is less threatening to our nervous system, that has a big impact for not a huge amount of time and effort. So one of the things I like to have people start with in the morning is just 1 minute of respiration training. And that can be as simple as just breathing in through your nose, pausing, breathing out through your mouth like you're breathing out of a straw, and making your exhalation twice as long as your inhalation. And there have actually been fMRIs that show that as few of 6 of those, we call it straw breathing, because it's like you're breathing out through a straw, you're giving your exhalation a little bit of resistance. As few as 6 of those breaths actually start to lower the sympathetic response of their nervous system, their fight or flight, and move them into more of a parasympathetic state of being, where they're in more of a calm and respond, rest and digest. So if you're feeling really stressed out, just stopping and taking 6 of those breaths can give you enough of a transition into a calmer state of being that then you will maybe not act in some behavior or pattern that you want to move out of.
Got it.
And then another, oh, go ahead.
Okay, just to clarify the breath before you move on to the next one. So the straw breathing, what you mean by straw is that you're making your lips smaller, and you're not just right,
Right.
you're resisting, you're breathing out slower, so that's what's going to allow you to make the exhale twice as long as the inhale, as you were saying. Is that pretty accurate of a
That's right.
summary?
And if you
Okay.
even had a straw, that would be even better. Blow out
Oh,
through the
cool.
straw.
Okay. So
Um,
so straw coming out of your mouth, you have inhale through your nose, breathe out through the straw. What's the time frame? Just a minute, you said?
yeah, as little as a minute could make a huge difference for someone.
Got
And
it.
then
Cool.
I also really like to do things that help with the chemical makeup of the blood, right? Because many of us are hyperventilators. And so then we get actually too much oxygen in the blood. And then
Mhm.
what that does is the blood vessels that are going up to our brain, giving it the fuel and the oxygen that it needs to function well, starts to get constricted. So the straw breaths will help with that. And then I also have people do a drill where you just pick an exercise. It can be whatever exercise makes you feel good, as long as you're working your big muscles. That's all that really matters. You just want to be getting blood flow. And so you could do squats, you could do push-ups, you could march, whatever it is for you. And you just take a breath in, you exhale completely, and then you hold your breath while you do as many repetitions as you can until you feel like you have to take a breath again. And then when you feel that sensation, maybe like you need to swallow, or just that tightness in your chest that's cueing you, I need to take another breath in, then you stop and you try to immediately control your respiration. So try not to gasp when you come out of it. Try to take nice, slow, gentle inhales through your nose and relaxed exhales through your nose, so that we're actually creating more CO2 in the blood, which will then open up those blood vessels and get more oxygen and glucose to the brain. So that's called air hunger. And you just pick an exercise, take a breath in, take an exhale, hold your breath, do as many reps as you can, and then try to immediately control your respiration afterwards.
Got it. So you hold your breath on the exhale. So
Mhm.
you let all the air out, exhale, hold it, do your reps. Now, when you go to draw your breath back in, do you stop the exercise or do you continue with the exercise
You
at that
stop
point?
the exercise. That's
Okay.
a great question. You
Okay.
stop the exercise and try to control your respiration right away. And I should say, as people are doing these, it's always important to assess and reassess. Like you said, Z Health is really big on that. And the idea is that everything should be customized, because everybody's nervous system is different. We all have our own unique life experiences and habitual movements and everything that makes us very unique. And
Right.
so your deficits might not be the same as mine. And so change at the level of the nervous system is instantaneous. It's lightning quick. So you can do something like assess a range of motion, even as simple as like turning your head, turning your head side to side and seeing how far you can see out of the corner of your eye, or do an exercise, do a push up, do something, and then do the drill, like do the air hunger drill or the 6 straw breaths, and then reassess and see if you have greater range of motion, see if the exercise feels easier, see if you feel better. So you can just, beforehand drop internally, rate your pain, rate your energy, and see if you feel better afterwards. And if the drill is a good drill for you, you should feel better right away.
So if
And
you
if, Go ahead.
and then if you do feel better right away, is that something like, okay, cool, this is good feedback. I should do this tomorrow again.
That's right. That's
Right?
right.
Okay,
You want to
cool.
build like a collection of really high payoff drills that you can do on a regular basis to give your brain the stimulus that it's craving and to help regulate your nervous system. And if you get a negative response, that means something about it was threatening to your nervous system. And there's so many reasons why that could be. And without working with someone, I'm not really sure. So it would be better if that happens to just say, this isn't my drill, and try another one. And there's other ways to change the drill, to change the intensity, to look for why it's threatening. But for now, I think it would be better to say, this is not the drill for me. I'm going to find another one and use that as my high payoff that I do throughout the day.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So Elizabeth, I want to go bigger picture now. So we talked a lot about specifics about nervous system, about sort of getting you from fight or flight into more of that rest and digest. We're going to go big picture now, though. So we're going to give you a chance to give your motivational speech to, let's say, like a college or university, or maybe a corporation invites you in to do a motivational talk. What's your 1 to 2 minute motivational speech about, again, big picture goals, life in general, values, anything like that? You can go whatever direction you like.
I would have to say my big picture is that I believe that we are all capable of healing, and we're born with this innate capacity and deep wisdom to heal ourselves, and that our nervous systems, our brains, and our bodies are plastic and malleable and always changing. We just need the education and the tools to drive that change in a positive direction. And whether that's unwanted behavior, whether that's stress eating, pain, migraine, or just a lack of energy, a lack of enthusiasm and passion for life that happens when we've been under too much stress for too long. We all have the capacity of resolving those things. We just have to learn how. And so, if you feel frustrated, if you feel like you've been trying to create this big, beautiful life and you can't quite level up in the way that you want without getting held back by what feels like a body that's working against you, then it's just because you don't have the right tools. And start by just coming into your body and asking it what it needs. Start by learning how to be present in your body, listening to the signals that it's giving you, and then move out from there. We've all become, not we've all, but many of us have become so disconnected from our bodies. And there's so much there to learn and to heal from, and to let guide our lives in a direction where they can be really expansive and powerful. So I would encourage people to start a practice of maybe trying to spend at least 30 seconds to a minute coming into their own body, feeling the sensations inside of it, becoming acquainted with how that feels to be in your body, and to seek answers for these things, because they're not always as complicated, and they're not always as external as we might think they are.
Makes a lot of sense. Elizabeth, thank you for that. And how can people get a hold of you? Website, social media? How can people contact you?
The best place to reach me is on my website, which is brainbased-wellness.com. And you can reach out to me there. And I also have a free applied neurology course that you can sign up for that'll teach you how to assess and reassess drills. And it also teaches another 5 of the drills that I found to be most high payoff for the largest number of my clients. And so it'll teach you those tools and give you an outline for a morning practice, so that again, you can start to implement that real minimum effective dose into your daily routine and learn a few drills that you can weave throughout the day to start really affecting change at the level of your nervous system and your body.
Sounds good. Well, Elisabeth, Kristof, again, I want to thank you for joining me today on the Health in the Real World podcast, and hopefully we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Health in the Real World show. Make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below. Visit mycorebalance.com to learn more.